what is the way forward really for these two countries? Because it's not like our trade is falling. And there are a lot of dependencies we do have, say, in a sector like pharma, for example. So, given this, and yes, the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra is a great step forward, but given these dependencies, what is then the way forward for India and China?
Look, I am of the view that trade between India and China is not a bad thing. I think that China is the world's biggest manufacturer. It's the biggest trading partner for 100 plus countries. It's an important neighbor for India. Trade between India and China is not a bad thing. Not because of just all of those reasons, but because I think trade with China can also help India achieve its developmental objectives. That's my primary sort of concern. That's what we need to achieve. Secondly, trade can act as a bit of a ballast, right? But when relations are difficult, trade can be very useful. And we're seeing that in the US-China case also, right? Economic linkages make it difficult to have scraps in the military domain. And I think that that's a good thing. Now, there is obviously this case of dependencies that is important to take into account. To my mind, the idea of de-risking is something that India has to sort of evolve. I think we've not necessarily thought through what our approach to de-risking might be. And let me give you an example. All dependencies are not bad. Some dependencies are useful, right? Because it also creates constituencies on either side for stability. And all dependencies need not be deeply problematic. If India imports a significant amount of capital goods from China, they contribute to Indian exports. So that's not a bad thing. Where dependencies are problematic is when they become vulnerabilities. So how does a dependency become a vulnerability? Well, when you're excessively dependent on a particular entity, the question then arises, what is excessive? To my mind, and my colleagues have made this argument also, that China sort of contributes about 30% of global trade. If India is importing a particular product which is well above 30%, India's import dependence on China, that product is well above 30%, then that's a case to start thinking about vulnerabilities. Now, all vulnerabilities don't require government action, right? So if we are importing 70% of our toys from China, well, that does not require government action. Yes, it's hurting toy manufacturers in India, but they need to figure out how to become much more competitive, right? It's not necessarily hurting strategically the country's security. But if you are importing 80%, 70% of your APIs, that's a problem, right? Because health has a cascading effect on society. So what do you need to do for that? You need to devise a de-risking strategy. And part of that has to be government intervention to try and potentially raise the costs of APIs or to incentivize Indian pharmaceutical companies to invest in the country. For that, you might have some sort of subsidy schemes, or you might liberalize your exports, and you might have different deals with different countries to sort of invite Indian pharmaceutical products, or so you can have a set of different things that you can do to try and reduce that level of dependencies. And in that, you'll have to engage industry. So I think it's firstly important to study which sectors do we have high levels of dependencies, which of those dependencies impact India's strategic interests or security, and then start to think about, well, what is the sort of diversified de-risking operations that can be done. In some cases, you can partner with third countries to try and create a secure supply chain. That does not mean you stop importing from China. You still take the price advantage from China, but you might mandate that a certain percentage of this must come from secure supply chains. So that could just be a policy decision that the government makes, which is passed down to industry. So there are different types of things that you can do to try and deal with those vulnerabilities. But all dependencies are not bad, right? Toys is the best example that I can give you. It's not a problem at all. And I think we should think of it from that point of view. At the end of the day, no action that we take should fundamentally hurt India's development pathway. Because if you don't have development and economic growth, that asymmetry with China is also going to exacerbate, and it's going to hurt us strategically much more.
Click the join button below and be part of Strat News Global members only community.